The objectives of this video are to get proficient with 3 arthroscopic knots, and the skills are progressive. First we'll tie with rope, then we'll tie with suture or fishing line, and then we'll use a video camera system to tie the knots. So to set up your lab, first stabilize a hook or an eyelet and use rope or suture. And to practice this, you'll need a knot pusher, a hemostat, and a cannula. Then you're going to do this under video control. So here's an example of a knot tying board with rope. You need to stabilize this. You can use a knot tying board for suture. And finally, you can use a video camera. These are inexpensive. And direct that toward your knot with suture, project it onto a video screen using a laptop or a desktop. Here's an example of a close-up. And you can really get an excellent experience watching the video screen instead of looking directly at your hands. If you set the screen resolution down a little bit, the refresh rate goes up, so the video won't be quite as jerky. But this is a really good way of practicing your knot tying skills by looking at the screen instead of looking directly at your hand. An option is to use the FAST workstation, which was a collaborative project. This workstation has a base which allows for tying with rope or with suture with the eyelets. There's also a suture mandrel which can be used, and within the base station you can place a loosened dome and finally an opaque dome, and the opaque dome has a hole for a USB camera which helps with practice. Definitions. The post limb is the straight portion of the suture limb. The wrapping limb is the free portion of the suture that wraps around the post. An effective knot possesses the attributes of both security for knot and loop. Knot security is the effectiveness of the knot to resist slippage, and loop security is the ability of the knot to maintain a tight suture loop. An effective arthroscopic knot requires both. The suture loop must be tight and should remain stable during delivery of the half hitches. So this is an example of a lack of loop security. A tight knot, but the loop was created a little bit stretched. This is Ian Lowe's video. As you can see, with stress on this knot, even though there's knot security, there isn't good loop security, and this will result in a loss of apposition. Here's an example of a Tennessee slider where initially the loop was expanded, and a locking knot where there's less expansion of that loop, but still the objective is to create a tight loop to achieve tissue apposition. If there's slack within the knot, it will also create a loose loop. And here's an example of a Duncan loop. This is created by shortening the post down, holding the post and the other strand, the non-post, in your left hand, wrapping 3 times around, and then bringing the suture back through the proximal loop. The slack is taken out by pulling distally on the non-post strand. And the point of this video is to show that you need to remove all of the slack from within that Duncan loop, because once it's advanced down into the joint, if there's internal slack, we'll get a loose loop. Another technique is to use pass pointing. This is an example of suture with a metal hook. But with each successive hitch, we go pass point with the knot pusher, and the purpose is to take all of the slack out of that knot, because any internal slack will result in either loop insecurity or knot insecurity. So in terms of knot security, each of the knots that you'll practice needs to be backed up with half hitches, because even a good knot initially without half hitches will loosen. The objective is to have a tight knot so that the suture becomes the weak link, not the knot itself. So here's an example again from Dr. Lowe showing a nice Duncan loop, but these are all stacked hitches on a single post, and with stress, unless they're backed up hitches, this knot will loosen. Here's an example of an internal locking mechanism which helps because when you pull that suture, it locks the knot, but it still needs to be backed up. The half hitch is formed by wrapping the suture limb once around the post limb, and the half hitch is named according to position on the post limb, under over or over under. So to create half hitches with rope, here's the nomenclature. This is an over under hitch. Post is in blue. And this is an under over hitch. Again, the post is in the left hand. You can flip the post by just pulling on the other strand. Now the white is the post, and now the blue is the post. That's flipping posts. So here's examples of reversed half hitches on the same post and reversed half hitches on alternating posts. If you're practicing with suture, you need to place a knot pusher on the post strand and then put a hemostat behind it. The hemostat allows you to control the post. The left hand pulls the post and the right hand pushes the knot. Once you deliver the knot, shorten that hemostat, helps with control, then tension the strands and pass point. You need to get comfortable and practice with 3 knots for this exercise. All knots must be backed up with reversed half hitches. You'll practice the Tennessee slider, the Revo knot, and the Weston knot. Remember, 3 half hitches. Here's how you create a Tennessee slider. With rope, shorten the non-post strand, separate the 2 strands a bit between your thumb and index finger, go over again, and then bring the strand up through, and you're creating kind of a pretzel around the post. Deliver the knot by gently pulling on the post and pushing forward with a knot pusher if you're using suture. And then take the tension out of the knot. And now you're going to back it up with 3 half hitches that are reversed on reversed posts. And my finger is mimicking pass pointing there. So now we're going to reverse the post by pulling on the white strand. You can also do this by changing the knot pusher on the post. And now the blue suture is the post, and we'll advance back down. So those are 3 reversed half hitches on reversed posts. Here's an example of doing the Tennessee slider with suture. The knot pusher is brought over the post strand. Place a hemostat. Remember to shorten the post. About 1/3 on the post, 2/3 on the non-post strand. Separate those sutures a bit between your thumb and index finger. Go over again. This can be made a bit easier in the operating room by having an assistant separate the strands as they enter the cannula. Now you're going to deliver the knot by pulling gently on the post and pushing gently on the knot pusher. Once the knot's delivered, there's quite a bit of post strand now, so you want to shorten your hemostat. Hold the non-post strand more firmly now, and you're going to seat the knot. You can see forward pressure on the knot pusher. A little bit of pass pointing, that should hold the knot in position. And now you're going to create 3 reversed half hitches on reversed posts. Having the hemostat in the left hand helps control that suture, makes it a lot easier. Notice that we're going pass point on each of the successive reversed half hitches on reversed posts. The next knot will be a non-sliding knot. Imagine the suture anchor is placed, but you can't slide the suture. This is the Revo knot. So you'll create a half hitch, over under, another half hitch in the same direction, over under, now a reversed half hitch on the same post, advance that down, and now you're going to reverse the post and go over under, tension that down and pass point, and now we're going to go back to tension on the blue, the original post, with an over under, and that's the final Revo knot. Here's an example of the revo knot with suture. In this case, the strands are equal because this was a non-sliding knot, so the length is the same. The first two hitches are placed in the same direction. Take some of the slack out. Now the third hitch is in the reverse direction on the same post. Take the slack out. Now we're going to go with the post in the right hand, showing the tension on the right hand. That has now become the post, and pass point. And then another hitch, and now the tension is in my left hand, so that becomes the post, and we'll seat the knot completely. Finally, the Weston knot. This will be the third knot. This is a locking sliding knot, so we'll shorten the post strand. We're going to create a twist proximal to the thumb, then pass the suture down through a second twist between the index and middle finger, and pass the loop down distal to the thumb. This is a technique that I learned from Heinz Hennecke, but when you play with the knot and sort of reposition it, you'll see that this actually creates the same exact configuration as you see on your diagram. Here's a close-up of that configuration, and I found it just to be an easier way to create the Weston knot. We're going to deliver that down, and then once it's seated, this is the locking mechanism as you pull with the non-post strand, and you can see that flips the Weston knot. And then the Weston is backed up with 3 reversed half hitches on reverse posts, as we do for all of the arthroscopic knots, and mimicking pass pointing with the rope using my fingers. Here's a close-up of the mechanics of how to create the Weston knot, just so you can practice this. Create a twist and go under with your thumb and back up. Put that twist proximal to your thumb, then pass your index and middle through the distal twist, pass the suture through, and then finally distal to your thumb, drop it down, and that creates the Weston knot. Pull on the post strand, push gently with your knot pusher. So the blue is your post, that seats the knot, and then there's the flip of the Weston. So here's the mechanics of how to do this with suture. The snap goes proximal. We're going to shorten the post, create the twist proximal to the thumb. We're going to cross the sutures and pass down to our index and middle. And then finally, the suture gets dropped distal to your thumb. And there's the Weston knot. We're going to pull on the post, push gently with the knot pusher. Now it's delivered. We're going to shorten the hemostat, makes it easier to control the post. Make sure that the knot is fully seated by pulling on the post and pushing on the knot pusher, and that locks the knot with tension on the right hand. You feel a pop when you're doing this, usually in the operating room. And now we're going to back it up with 3 reversed half hitches on reversed posts to complete the Weston knot. There are some common errors in prevention strategies that will help you. First, understand the nomenclature by identifying the post limb and loop limb. Secondly, make sure your sutures slide freely. You can pass the knot pusher down. Make sure that the initial post limb is on the single hole knot pusher, and avoid any twists or tangles in the post. This will tangle up your knot. If the creation of the loop limb is too short, you won't have enough suture to tie. Make sure that you have those posts organized with your hitches, and you have to back up your knot with 3 successive half hitches. The sutures can become tangled, so remember to use transparent cannulas and always tie through a cannula. The suture can become abraded if you're rough with it, so be gentle. And you have to reverse the posts in order to stack your hitches. Remember, arthroscopic knot tying is technically demanding, so practice, practice, and practice before you come to the lab.